Mr. Piltz, we'll now hear from you. We welcome you here. Let me, just for housekeeping purposes, ask unanimous consent that all of the statements submitted by our witnesses will be made part of the record. And without objection, that'll be the order. Mr. Piltz.
Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Davis, members of the committee, I greatly appreciate the opportunity to present testimony at this hearing. And there is considerable more detail in my written testimony. I endorse all of the conclusions and recommendations in the Joint Union of Concerned Scientists Government Accountability Project report. And to complement that, my testimony will focus on the administration's treatment of the National Assessment of Climate Change Impacts and the problem of the White House Council on Environmental Quality. From April 1995 until March 2005, I worked in the coordination office of what is now called the U.S. Climate Change Science Program, the federal multi-agency federal program that supports the scientific research on climate and associated global environmental change. I had various responsibilities and worked on many projects during those 10 years. I worked directly with the agency leadership and with the senior professional staff in the coordination office. One key ongoing project for which I was responsible involved coordinating the development of and editing 9 editions of the annual report to Congress, Our Changing Planet, which represents the government-wide research program. And in doing that, I would compile and edit into accessible language the contributions of about 90 scientists and science program managers in the federal agencies and labs, and those reports were carefully reviewed and vetted and signed off on by the agency experts, and then they would go to the Executive Office of the President for final editing and review and clearance before publication. During the 2001-2005 timeframe, I came increasingly to the conclusion that the administration was acting to impede forthright communication of the state of climate science and its implications for society, and that the politicization of climate science communication by the current administration was undermining the credibility and integrity of the climate change science program in its relationship to the research community, to the program managers, to policymakers, and to the public. So in March 2005, I left the program office, resigning my position in protest. I saw that the problem was manifested especially at the points at which scientifically based information regarding climate change was communicated to a wider audience, to Congress, to the public. It wasn't so much a matter of interfering with what scientists were publishing in geophysical research letters or other technical journals. It was when the science would come forward to be communicated to a wider audience that the political gatekeepers would step in. Now, I'm not a climate scientist by academic training, and I don't debate technical issues. I'll leave that for Dr. Schindel and other eminent climate scientists, but I can tell you what happens when the climate science comes forward into this arena of wider communication and the collision between science and politics. And really among the issues that I regarded as politically significant, particularly significant in this politicization, was the administration's treatment of the National Assessment of Climate Change Impacts, which was carried out in the 1997-2000 timeframe pursuant to the Global Change Research Act of 1990. And this was a report that was developed by a panel of climate and ecosystem scientists and other experts that is to this day the most systematic and comprehensive effort to assess the potential implications of global warming and climate change for the United States. The report identified a range of likely adverse societal and environmental impacts This report has essentially been made to vanish by the Bush administration. All reference to it by federal agencies has been prohibited. All use of it in reports to Congress and other climate change communications has been suppressed. The scientist stakeholder networks that developed this report have been abandoned, and no follow-on work of a comparable sort has been undertaken. Now, I discuss this in considerably greater detail in my written testimony, but starting in 2002, the White House Council on Environmental Quality placed Philip Cooney, as Chief of Staff, at the table as part of the governance of the U.S. climate change science program. Now, CEQ is a policy shop, not a science office. It's my understanding that Mr. Cooney was the proximate agent of the White House's directive to the federal agencies to suppress the national climate assessment. Of course, he was not acting independently. He was an operative in a chain of command leading up through CEQ Chairman Connaughton to the President. But there were many aspects of the way CEQ intervened to manipulate communication on climate change. And this was one example. In conclusion, in addition to the UCS GAP recommendations, I would recommend it's very important to revitalize this national assessment process. Every member, I think, has a vital interest in this regional level, sectoral level analysis of putting the top experts together with direct communication with policymakers and other stakeholders to diagnose the problems and develop solutions. And what you need, I think, is this direct, unimpeded communication between the experts and policymakers, and get the gatekeepers out of the way.
Thank you very much, Mr. Piltz.